Today is April 9th, 2016, and we are in Uvalde, Texas. Like I said, I'm Reina Olivas with the Voces Oral History Project, and I am interviewing Elva.
Elvia.
I'm sorry. Whenever I try to speak Spanish and English, I get my tongue twisted. But thank you, Elvia, for being here today with us.
Quite welcome.
And for taking the time to talk about the Uvalde Walkout with us today. Like Dr. Maggie mentioned, this is a piece of history that is important and that should be shared with everyone. So I'm going to start off asking you kind of just with time periods. We can start with your childhood. And then if I feel like there's something that we can dive in further, then we'll go ahead that way. And like Dr. Maggie mentioned, if you feel like there's something I'm not asking you think is important to this story, go ahead and say, I think this is important.
Okay.
I don't think we've touched on it. But we can go ahead and start off with, what was it like growing up here in Uvalde? What would you say your experience growing up here was like?
It was a very good place to grow up. It's a small town. And then I grew up within an even smaller community because, like I told you, I went through Sacred Heart School from the time I was in kinder until I was in the 8th grade. So I grew up with a core group of families. The kids in my class, I didn't know a lot of people outside of school and outside of church, but you know, it was a good group of families. We were hardworking. We are, continue to be. We are hardworking families, and everybody looked out for everybody else. So you know, within our community, we were pretty secure. We could go to school on our own, walk on our own. I would go to my piano lesson, which was about 2 miles away. I had a bicycle. I would get on my bike and go to my piano lesson. So it wasn't like, we felt safe. It was a good place.
And I'm not sure if you had an idea when you were young, but was there anything when you were a kid that you say, I want to be that when I grow up?
I think I always knew that I was going to be a teacher.
Okay.
I always knew that. School was just heaven for me. I loved it. Like I told you, I started school when I was 4. My mother talked the nuns into taking me, and I think I went through kindergarten. Or maybe I was 3. I think I went to kindergarten for 2 years because there wasn't a pre-K back then. But I always knew that was my vocation. I was meant to do that. And so that's what I did. Mm-hmm.
And I know we talked about this a little bit in your pre-interview form, but I guess we can kind of dive into it a little bit more. You said your family was religious and you attended church every week. Can you tell me a little bit how religion shaped your life as a child?
Religion was a big part of it because, like I said, going through Catholic school, we got our catechism, and we were very immersed. My family was very immersed in the church, and so our values, our mores, were always shaped by that education and how that education was informed by our religion. And it gave me, I think ever since I was very young, I remember having a very keen sense of social justice and social injustice. Because in my 2-mile bike ride to my piano teacher's house, you could see the changes in the neighborhoods. You could see the neighborhoods where we lived and the neighborhoods where the Anglo community lived.
What kind of changes would you say that you saw?
The housing was a much better quality housing. Our homes were adequate, but they weren't, well, and I don't even know that we're not luxurious, but they seem to be more well constructed, more adapted to the climate. You know, the quality of the housing stock was different. I would go through Park Street, which is where the Garner Museum is located, and see the big giant houses that they lived in. And our houses were smaller, but like I said, we got along, but you could see the differences. And even as a child, I could perceive those differences. I saw it. I was an avid reader. I spent a lot of time at the Garner, what is now the Briscoe Garner Museum, used to just be the John Nance Garner Museum, and it was also our library, and I spent a lot of time in the library. I'm an avid reader, have always been, and then I could see it in books too. I could see it in the stories. I could perceive it.
What did you see in the books?
Well, the different ways that people lived, and so I think it motivated me to want to keep going, to do better. So.
And you say that since you were young, you noticed these injustices. Would you say that you noticed them in school as well? I know I haven't gotten to this part, but when you attended elementary school, were you with children of other races, or was it more of like a separatism within school?
Our little school was a very small school, and we were very sheltered. And it was primarily Hispanics, Mexican-Americans in the school. We had an odd, every now and then we'd have some Anglo kids, but it was more Hispanic than anything else. And so I grew up with leadership roles from very early on because it was such a small little place, and so as a kid, it was a very idyllic place to be. Mm-hmm.
What about your teachers? Would you say, or tell me about your teachers?
The teachers were nuns. Okay. All of the teachers at that time were nuns, and they were tremendous women. They were so giving, and they invested so much of themselves in us. We had opportunities, and we did activities that I don't even think the kids in the I don't even think the kids in the public schools were getting. We would, every year, one of our nuns would get a one-act play. We would do a one-act play. I remember being in a one-act play since I was in kindergarten, all the way through when I was a star of the show in 8th grade. But we did all kinds of things with them. I remember dissecting animals when we were maybe like in 5th or 6th grade, just because, the opportunity came up and it was a teachable moment, and the nuns would seize it and would, share it with us and make us grow. So it was a really good place to be.
It sounds like a very nice school.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and that Sacred Heart was from kinder through 8th, so we can transition into high school. Mm-hmm. So tell me how you went to Uvalde High School. Tell me the
difference?
Paradigm difference between the two.
Oh, it was a marked difference. It was an eye-opening experience. From the time I was 13 when I got there, and I got there late because I had been sick, so I was about 2 weeks late getting started. And but that summer before, we had all been called in for registration, and we had a meeting, and I remember the whole freshman class was in the cafeteria, and they said, "Who's going to college?" And so all the Anglo kids raised their hands. I raised my hand because I knew I was going. My mother had told me I was going, so I was going to go. I didn't know how, but And then as a result of that, they gave us different schedules. And I happened to be in the college track, And so as a result of that, I was always in a class. It's like a cohort. We moved together from grade to grade. Our classes were geared to preparing us for college. And so I don't know. I mean, I remember that the other kids didn't take chemistry or algebra 2 or physics or anything. I think they were in other more basic classes, and a lot of them were going into vocational skills tracks. And so they would track us into different things. And so it was a very big difference. All of a sudden, the competition was a lot fiercer, and that was okay. I was up to the challenge. And it was, and I got along because, like I said, I had my friends that were not necessarily in my class. I seldom had them in a class, but they were my social friends and my friends over here in the classrooms that I was interacting with throughout high school. And the Anglo kids got to know me, and so I had a lot of different opportunities that a lot of other kids didn't have. I was, like I said, an officer in several clubs and in student council and in different things. And I did well.
So how did that, like, initial separation and even throughout, what did you think of that, or how did that make you feel? And when you kind of, did you notice that, the fact that they were separating kids that were geared for college and weren't? But what were your thoughts throughout that process?
I remember thinking, wow, because it was a handful of us Hispanics, thinking, wow, why aren't more kids signing up for this? Why aren't more kids signing up to take these more rigorous courses so that they can be ready for something more? I was very lucky in that my mother had always told us that we had to go. It was not a question of if, but of when we go. She always said, when you go, you're going to have to work hard and you're going to have to do well. And I expect nothing throughout elementary school, all of us, and I'm the first of 10. We were expected to behave, and we were expected to have good grades. And by good grades, I mean A's and B's. Nothing less than that. And they were strict but loving and unwavering in their expectations of us. So very, very lucky to have such good parents.
Right. So I know we talked about how you were initially separated. Did you ever have conversations with your social friends as far as why they weren't taking these classes, or what they thought, or if they weren't going to college?
Well, I did. I was always a teacher since, and I always tried to get them to, come on, sign up for this. No, I can't do that. Yes, you can. But I guess maybe the expectation wasn't there from home, and so a lot of them didn't think that they could. So.
Okay. So some of these questions are, we can dive into college questions later on, because I do want to talk about the walkout before we move on to that. How old were you when the walkout started?
I was 17.
And what did you know about teacher George Garza?
I didn't know very much about him. I think from what I knew, he had been a teacher, or he was a teacher. I think he was a teacher. And he was teaching at Anthem Elementary, I think. And he was a Hispanic, So a lot of the people, a lot of the parents would go to him, from what I understood, would go to him for help because he could speak their language. He could speak Spanish, he could communicate with them. And at that time, we had one or two Hispanic teachers, but they were rare. The norm was a female Anglo teacher. The coaches were all men, of course, but the ladies in the elementary schools were primarily Anglo ladies. And so they went to him when they felt they had a concern or they had a problem, and he would try to help them or mediate for them. And I understood that, I guess the principal didn't appreciate that he did that he became an advocate for the parents, or was seen as an advocate by the administrators, and that they began to give him a hard time, and that I think that he was either threatened or he was fired. And that's when the community rose up, because he was the one that they could go to. And they felt that they had lost a valuable resource in Mr. Garza. Mm. So that's when the community said, and it was, you have to put it all in context. It was the era of civil rights. There had been a lot of activity in the black community, and there was a lot of activity in California with Cesar Chavez. It was a time, I think, of not awakening, because I think Maggie's right, and I think the awakening came as a result of World War II and the Hispanics participating in the armed forces and getting out into the world. And but I think it became a time when people said, okay, now this is the time to begin to take some action to make a difference for ourselves. And so as a result of that, they said, okay, well, let's organize a walkout, and we'll do it in support of Mr. Garza, because we can't afford to lose good people that are in the staff that are very few. And so this is how we're going to support him. And so, and I told Maggie this, I don't remember a lot of it. And I told her that I think it's a defense mechanism, because school had always been such an important part of my life. And to give up on it was to walk away, to walk out, it was the right thing to do. Morally, I knew it. Intellectually, I knew it. But it was a big loss for me as well. It was a very big loss, because I had always done well in school. I was one of the top kids in the class. But my sense, remember I told you I had a very keen sense of justice, and my sense of social justice prevailed. And I said, this is something I have to support. It's the right thing to do. And so I made the decision, and my dad was not okay with it. But my mom convinced him. And he says, she's only 17, she's going to go off to college. My mother said, yes, but it's important. It's important that if this is what she wants to do, we have to support her, because I too feel that it's the right thing. I too feel that it's time that people begin to speak up, and that people begin to exercise their rights as citizens. And so I joined the walkout. And it was painful because it was a big loss. I was one of the top kids in the class, and the rumor was that I was going to be the valedictorian. And so I gave it up for the greater good, I think.
For the greater good, right. And do you feel now, after so many years of the walkout, do you feel like it was still the right thing to do?
Yes, yes, it was the right thing to do. It was not as well organized as it could have been. You know, looking back in hindsight, you look at it and you think, wow, it was not a good time. It was in April, as a matter of fact. It was like the last part of the school year, and we were seniors. And it was not as well organized as it could have been, but nobody had any experience in any of this. So we were just doing the best we could in the best way that we could. It did become a very divisive issue in the community. Everybody was not in favor of it. And so it was difficult to see that. I mean, as a 17-year-old, I could see that it was the right thing, and it was difficult for me to see that adults were so afraid of taking that step, of supporting their kids. And so a lot of kids didn't walk out because they did not have the support at home. But it was the right thing to do.
And you mentioned that your mom was okay with you participating in the walkout, and she eventually convinced your dad. Do you think that created a divisive environment within your home, or did
No.
Was it?
No. Once my dad became convinced, then he was very supportive as well. And I don't know if you have a question about this, but there was a lot of support, external support, from outside of the community. And so, despite the fact that we walked out, Senator Humphrey came and offered us scholarships and offered to help us get us into colleges and universities. And ever since I was a kid, I had an accident when I was a child. I was about 6, and it caused me to have to go to San Antonio several times. At first it was like once a month, and then later on it was like once a year, just to make sure that I was okay. And my mom and I would go on the bus, and we would go into San Antonio, and I would go by Our Lady of the Lake University. And I would tell my mom, look, Mom, that's where I'm going to go to college. And so even with the walkout, some of the colleges, opened their arms to us and accepted us. And so I got into the university through a special interview that I had with the academic dean at the time, Sister Elizabeth Claire Metz. I will never forget her. And she said, okay, come in. But when you're 19, I was 17 at the time, when you're 19, you're going to have to take a GED test. So when I was 19, I went to San Antonio College, which is like a 2-year beginning college, and did my GED exams. And then was able to finish at Our Lady of the Lake. So it was an interesting time.
But it worked out.
It worked out.
Mm-hmm. So let's backtrack a little bit. I'm glad you shared that story about going to San Antonio and seeing Our Lady of the Lake since you were little. I think that's something very important. But can you walk me through, I know you say you don't remember much, but from what you remember, can you walk me through a typical day of the walkout? What did you guys do? What did you talk about? Or what was the environment like?
Like I said, there were people who supported it and people who did not. But we had some kids, at that time they were, what was that organization called? Vista Volunteers. They were Vista Volunteers, and they came to support us, and they came and they organized a school. So we had a little school for the younger kids, for the little ones, and we would take them through their basics, so that they didn't feel like they had left too far. They would be left too far behind. So we would help. I would help with that. There were some wonderful, wonderful ladies. The Hispanic matriarchs are a tremendous resource to any community. And they came forth and they volunteered and they would help in every way possible. The parish priest was behind the effort. He loaned us the old building, the old church building that was no longer in use. We had that. So we had, little corners that we could work with. I did volunteer with the kids, and we tried to keep up the skills of the little ones. But despite that, one of the very unfortunate and sad consequences was that a lot of kids lost a year of school. Everyone was not as fortunate as some of us. They had to go back and repeat the year because they had missed a whole lot of school at the end of the year, and so that was the consequence that a lot of kids had to pay. So, but there was all kinds of activity going on. The little school, the ladies came in and helped not only with the school effort, but they actually cooked for us. I don't know where that came from, where the food came from.
What did you guys eat?
Like little lunches, like little cafeteria lunches.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where they got it. They were just amazing. And then there were meetings in the evening, but I don't really know what the I remember that Gabriel Tafoya and Jose Uriegas, I think, were some of the organizers, but I didn't know the nuts and bolts of it. I knew, that my effort was there to be there and to be supportive of the effort, but I didn't know the nuts and bolts of it. I really don't remember being included in major decision making. But I do remember, this is one thing that it's clear as a bell. I remember that we went, I remember being included with Olga Rodriguez and several other people in the meeting where we went to address the school board. And I think that it was a shocker. It was that we were seen as radicals and agitators. And I remember, gosh, that's not who I am. I was awarded the Citizenship Award last year as a junior. The Optimist Club recognized me as a good citizen. And all of a sudden I'm a radical and an agitator. And I remember that we were walking into that building, into the little building where the school board met, and looking up the barrel of a Texas Ranger's rifle. They were on the roof with guns pointed down at us.
How did that make you feel?
That was harsh. That was harsh. I thought, gosh, this is America. We have the right as citizens to speak up and to speak out. And that I didn't understand that. That's the one thing that I remember very, very clearly. So, and it was painful.
The way you describe it with detail, I can see how.
And we weren't asking for anything radical. We were asking for help for the kids. We were asking that the kids, that it was, the bilingual program had begun in the state, and we felt like, wow, that would be a good thing for kids to have support, learning English, making the transition. It's a difficult transition to make. It would be good to have some support for the kids, and we wanted that. We wanted more Hispanic teachers, more Hispanic administrators. The town was 50-50. Why couldn't the schools reflect that? So that was, we didn't experience I think our black fellow citizens had it much harder. They had to endure beatings. But still, it was like, oh my goodness.
I feel like I was there that day, the way you described looking up that Texas Ranger gun. Very powerful memory. And I know that, you say that I'm sure, you were on track to go be the valedictorian of your class, but you felt compelled, like this was the right thing to do. As you were making that decision of participating in the walkout or not, what were your fears, or what were the thoughts going on through your head?
Well, I really, amazingly, was not afraid. I was determined that I was going to go to college, and if I couldn't go the way I had intended, then I was going to find a way around it, but I was going. I knew that that was something that I was going to do. So at that time, I was not afraid. I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it. And I thought, well, I can start here at the junior college. I can take entrance tests if they want me to. There's bound to be a way to get in. There's bound to be something else that I can do if I can't get in the normal way. So I had good SAT scores. I was ready to go, and I knew that I was going to go somehow. And when that opportunity presented itself through Senator Humphrey's office, I said, wow, okay, we're going to manage. This is going to be okay.
And how long would you say the walkout lasted, or how long did you participate in the walkout?
It started in, I think, right around mid-April, if I remember correctly. And then we never went back to school. We never went back to school that year. And so the district was hit hard because public schools are funded through attendance. And that's been in place, that mechanism has been in place for a long time. And so the schools were hit hard because the funding, I'm sure, was cut because of our lack of attendance. But thank goodness that I think bilingual programs were instituted, and different things did come into place. It didn't happen as quickly as we would have liked, but it came into being, and it happened also through through a decision that was made in the courts. There was a lawsuit that was created, and and the courts found that there was some discrimination going on, and so as a result, Uvalde, the state said Uvalde had to have single attendance areas in order to make things more even, because there were fewer resources going to the schools that were predominantly Hispanic. And so in order to alleviate that or ameliorate that problem, all the first graders had to go to this school, everybody. All the second graders had to go here. And so that's what's called a single attendance area. Throughout the whole city, instead of going to your neighborhood school, there had to be busing so that there was better integration. And it provided kids with, I think, better opportunity, because they could see, they could interact with other kids, and they could see how other kids perceived things, how they proceeded, how they talked. So good language models, I think, for kids. Get to know each other better. Get to know each other better. And interact more frequently.
So continuing on the walkout theme, or the walkout time period, I know you said that a lot of people in the community were against the walkout because of certain fears. How do you think your feelings changed about yourself during the walkout? And how did you perceived others, particularly the people that didn't participate in the walkout?
Well, I think that I was disappointed. I think I was disappointed. I was sorry to see that they didn't have the same understanding of the issue, the right and wrong of the issue, the moral issue. But I could understand that, you know, everybody's different. Everybody's different. Some people are more afraid than others. Some people are more open to change than others. I was very lucky to have the mother that I do. And so, you know, I didn't hold any grudges. I thought, okay, everybody has to do what feels right for them. And so if their family's not supportive of it, you know, what are you going to do? You can't, it's not the kid's fault, and you can't change the family, so.
So what would you say was the overall effect that this had on you? Do you think that you deciding to participate in the walkout because you felt it was the right thing to do you think that continued on throughout your life? Or did it have a specific effect?
I think it's had an effect in terms of, or not an effect, but I mean, it's always been a principle. It's always been a guiding principle. You do something because it's the right thing to do. You help here because it's the right thing to do. So it's who I am.
So do you think that participating, did it lead to any more political activism within your life down the line?
Oh, yes. I participated in marches in Houston and Austin and San Antonio in support of Chicano activity and Chicano political causes. And then later, like I said, in San Antonio, trying to make the city better, work better for our Hispanic community through, like I said, the Cops and Metro Alliance. So I've tried to do a little bit to make a difference.
So I guess to wrap up things a little bit with this time period, how do you think, like looking back on the walkout now, how do you think it shaped the Uvalde community? Do people still talk about the walkout now?
I don't think so. I don't think people remember all that much of it. I think that people have become complacent. They're not as politically active as maybe they should be. I think there's a great deal of apathy. And not just here, it's not just here, it's, I don't know why people don't get out and vote, but they don't. And it's their privilege, and they don't exercise it. It's their opportunity to voice their opinion, to shape what happens in their community, and they're disengaged. I don't know why, I guess. I'm glad that there's lots more economic opportunity for people. Things are better in terms of economics, but not always better in terms of the family, unfortunately, because mom and dad are both working, and sometimes they put too much emphasis on work and they don't try to balance things. And a lot of times I saw this, especially as a principal, they're working so hard to give kids things that they didn't have, that they don't invest any time in helping to shape who they are as people, and giving them some guiding principles and some moral values. And
so within your family, when you were growing up, was it dad worked and mom?
And mom stayed at home. Mm-hmm. And even in my own family now, my own family unit, I always worked, but I always made time for the kids too. You know, we did everything under the sun to make time for the kids, because guiding them and helping to shape them is so important. You bring them into the world so that hopefully they're going to contribute to making it a little better place to live. That's important to me.
I think that's very important too. So I guess a final question to wrap this up, or to wrap this time period up, and then we have just one more topic, I guess. What do you think was gained and what was lost from the walkout? Or if you think, do you think something was gained or lost?
I think at the time, yes. Like I said, there were some programs that were instituted to help kids. There was more support for them. But unfortunately, also, like I said, there was a lot of kids lost a year of school, and that was bad. That was terrible. That was terrible that kids lost a year of school and had to repeat a year, because all the research says that when kids repeat a year, they're much more likely to drop out of school. And that's what we wanted to prevent in the first place. Like I said, it wasn't as well organized. It was well thought out, I think, as well organized as it could have been. But it was an opportunity, and I think the people who organized it just seized on it and tried to create something good out of it. I think there was a lot of good that happened. People became more politically aware. I think a lot of people found their voice. So I think it was, despite the fact that it was difficult, I think it was good.
Are there any final things that you wanted to mention about the walkout that I didn't touch on, or any moments that you feel like you should include?
I remember, my mother always reminds me of this. I remember that, like I told you, the parish priest was behind our efforts. And I remember that Patricio Flores had just been made Archbishop in San Antonio. Or no, he wasn't Archbishop yet, he was Bishop. No. Yes, he was already a bishop, I think. And he came and he said a mass for our community. And I think that, really was a wonderful thing that he did, showing us support that way. It showed that we weren't alone, that we had the support of people that we didn't even realize, that the church was with us. It was a just cause, and that was real important. I think that was very good for the effort, because it reinforced our conviction, I think. So that was a good moment.
Thank you for sharing that. So I guess we can move on to more of career, community, political activism. Like Maggie mentioned, now that's something that we want to have conversations about. We want to talk. We want to put it out there. But we can talk about, I guess, a little bit of politics, because the walkout had to do with some politics, and we have a lot of politics right now that we hear and see that has a lot to do with us, with the Hispanic community. So from what you remember, to what extent were there Mexican-American leaders in your community?
Well, I think the community always had leaders. And some of them were involved in the political process, even though they may not have been, it may not have been as broadly recognized as it could have been, but the community always had leaders. And I know this because as a child, I remember that, let me start here. John Nance Garner was the first vice president under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And when he retired, he came back. This was where he lived, and when he retired, he came back to Uvalde, and he lived here, and he lived not too far from us, from my house. And one time I went to go visit him with my grandmother. I remember I was real little. And I remember that she went in and she said, "Good morning, John." And my first thought was, what? My grandmother speaks English? And she talked to him. And I was busy over there with the housekeeper, and she was giving me ice cream or something, I don't know. And later, I remember that my grandma lived right next door to us, and she was always at our house. She was always helping my mom because we were a bunch of kids, so we had a wonderful grandmother on both sides. And she was helping my mom in the kitchen, and they came, I think it was two men, came to the kitchen and knocked on the door. And they said, "Buenas tardes, Andrea. Nada más venimos a ver por quién vamos a votar." So my grandmother, I figure, putting two and two together later on, was one of the political leaders of her generation and of that time. She would, I think, broker deals, and people would come to her and say, "Who are we going to vote for, Andrea? Who are we supposed to support?" And so I know that there have always been leaders. It was not as widespread, it was not as well recognized, but there have always been leaders, people who have had sway over other people, and who have helped to shape the politics of a community. So there was a time, though, when things were very squelched. It was kind of repressive, I think. And people maybe they were afraid for their livelihoods more than anything, I think. And so they didn't choose to be openly political because they couldn't afford to be. And so I think that as a community, as Hispanics, as Mexican Americans, we've been through ups and downs. And I think for a time before the war, everything was in a lull. And then with the Second World War, people realized that they could make decisions that were going to shape their future and the future of their children. And that's when things started a lot of people took advantage of the GI Bill, got some education, became leaders in their communities, and began to make it a better place to be. So, but it's all about economics. It's all about being free in terms of worries about your livelihood and your support of your family, to be able to make decisions like that.
Right. In class, we did talk about the walkout and other things where people feared to lose their jobs. Mm-hmm. And even though they felt compelled to, do the right thing. And like you said, a lot of students didn't have maybe that support from their parents, but a lot of the parents didn't support it because they feared mm-hmm. to lose their jobs.
Exactly.
But, like you said, it's more having that economic mm-hmm. freedom mm-hmm. to pursue what mm-hmm. you think is right.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, what changes would you like to see in the future? I know that you said that you're trying to get involved with getting people to vote. Mm-hmm. What are the changes you would like to see in the future, or what are you working on now, or what do you hope to work on?
I would like to continue to help with voter registration efforts. I would like to see the immigrants that come in they come in because they want economic opportunity. But I would like to see them not only look for those economic opportunities, but to give back also, to become engaged in the process, to become citizens, to value education, to push their kids to become educated, to push their kids to be the scientists and engineers and doctors and teachers and lawyers that we need to maintain our freedoms, to exercise our political freedoms. I would like to see more of that happen. So that's what I'm going to be working on.
That sounds great. And what are some issues that you consider that are valuable to the Mexican American community now? I know you just mentioned voting and valuing that education to where you push your kids, but I guess on a grander scale, what do you think are some I wouldn't necessarily say issues, but some things that we as a Mexican American community can focus on?
Well, I think that if we do a good job at the grassroots level, then maybe we can help to launch some candidates, some good candidates at the national level. I think we need national leadership, people in high-profile places who can lead the community, people who are open, tolerant, accepting, all of the things that I don't see in the current candidates on the Republican side. It's scary. It's so scary. I see a lot of intolerance. And that intolerance, I think, is bubbling up from the general public. And that's scary. That's a scary thing. We don't need to be closing ourselves off. We need to be open and welcoming of immigrants because they bring lots of skills. We need to value the differences. We just need some good, strong leadership at the national level that can help push the country in the right direction, can help shape the direction for the future.
I agree. And like you said, it starts at the grassroots level.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything else you feel like I didn't touch on or we didn't discuss more in depth? Whether it has to do with your childhood or the walkout or your college experience. I know we didn't get to touch on much of your college experience, but is there something significant?
No, it was just a normal college. Well, I did, like I say, participate in several marches. I went to Houston, to Austin, to participate in marches, and there wasn't an organization for Hispanic students at Our Lady of the Lake, but I tried to keep up with what was going on and to help whenever there was volunteer, even in college, for voter registration drives and that kind of thing. But that's what everybody was doing. Everybody had a good conscience was doing. So, in that way, I don't think it was extraordinary. It was ordinary for the times.
Okay. Well, I think I have ran through my list of questions, but again, if you feel like we didn't touch on something, then speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, I can't think of anything right off the hand, but...
Okay, well, again, thank you so much for your time, Elvia.